Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to another week of When Black Women Gather. I'm so glad to see everybody this Sunday. We are going to be discussing a sensitive topic today, suicide in the Black community. Is it a topic that we avoid? You know, we think the way I'm thinking about it is we think that it doesn't happen as much in our community. Is that so? Or is it just one of those subjects that we don't talk about? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I am simply doing the introduction, laying out the ground rules, and our three members who put this thing together for us will be facilitating, and that's Angela Wyatt, Michelle Burgess, and in absentia, Kilpia Roberts, because she's in Aruba, but we ain't gonna beat her up for that. But when she gets this recording, we can make her feel a little guilty about it. But anyway, so as you know, the ground rules for all conversations are that we guarantee respect. We cannot and do not guarantee your comfort because we need to have these quote unquote uncomfortable, quote unquote difficult conversations. And if in fact we view a conversation in either of those terms, then it's probably a conversation that we need to have. So that's what we do here at When Black Women Gather. We have those conversations. This conversation is we have men and women on this conversation today. And the topic is, as I said, suicide in the Black community. The specific title of this conversation is Suicide in the Black Community, Awareness, Prevention, and Impact. It will be recorded. If you're not comfortable having your face or your name on camera, now is the time to change your name or take your face off. If you want to ask a question, anonymously, you can just send it to myself or any of the hostesses or our guests in private, and we will ask it for you, protecting your anonymity. And I am going to turn it over right now to our organizers for this call. I'm going to add them to the spotlight, and then I'm going to bow out and let you all take it from there. So you can introduce our guests, and I'm here if you need me. I will be here in the background helping. So I'm here if you need me, just call me or chat me or something. All righty, thank you all for coming.
Okay, my name is Angela Wyatt, and I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Dana L. Collins. She is originally from Oakland, California, and is currently based in Brooklyn, New York. She earned her BA degree in psychology from Spelman College, her MS degree in counseling and counselor education from Indiana University, and her PhD in counseling psychology from Boston College. She's a faculty member in the Department of Family and Social Medicine at Montefiore Medical Center. She has worked in K through 12th grade in the schools, in the community mental health settings, and higher education. She's the immediate past president of the New York Association of Black Psychologists, and she's also a member of the Association of Black Psychologists. In addition, Dr. Collins is a mindfulness meditation teacher. She is a writer, an educator, and an activist. Dr. Collins, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And it's so good to see so many people here. You know, we never quite know how Zoom calls are gonna go. And I think especially as the weather gets nice, you know, people wanna go off and do other things. I'm really thankful that you all are here. And I'm also really thankful that this is something that people do want to talk about. So I want to start off by saying that yes, I'll do some talking, give some information, but I'm hoping that this can really be, we can have some conversation. So I'm talking with you rather than talking at you. So I also really appreciate what Ms. Higgins said about the discomfort that this conversation might bring up. That is, we can't guarantee that you won't be uncomfortable, and sometimes being uncomfortable is doesn't feel comfortable, but sometimes it happens, and sometimes we need to be we need that. We need to be paying attention to it. So what I want to start off by doing is just doing a little bit of grounding, just to help us to settle in, to arrive, and to be aware of what is happening. And so that we can take care of ourselves. So if you feel that, you know, things are getting very difficult or overwhelming, you might want to step away to take care of yourself. You might want to go off camera. But I just want us to be aware of what's happening for us and to be as present as possible. So I'm going to walk us through it. If you are comfortable, you can close your eyes. And this grounding is just going to help us sort of be in the here and now, because we all have a lot going on in our lives, and it's easy to, you know, be thinking about the past or the future. And when we're doing that, it's harder to be, you know, present and aware of what's happening now. So grounding will help with that. So yeah, if you want to close your eyes, please do. And just find a comfortable position for the next couple of minutes or so. If you're sitting, you can maybe sit with your legs crossed or your feet flat on the floor if you're able to do that. And your hands and arms, you can either put in your lap or you can just put them by your side, whatever is comfortable. And I'm just going to invite everyone to take a few deep breaths in and out, maybe in through the nose or and out through the mouth, but whatever works for you. Maybe just a couple more. And then just start to breathe normally. Your body knows how to breathe. It's been doing it and keeping you alive all this time. So just breathe normally. And just let's take just a moment to bring the attention to our bodies and feel what is supporting you. So the seat, feel the seat, feel your body making contact with the seat. So you can start by just noticing the feeling of your bottom in the chair, and the chair, the cushion, the couch, whatever, holding you up and supporting you. Just notice what that feels like. And then your back, if your back is against a chair or a cushion, notice the feeling of contact there. And if your feet are on the floor or whatever your feet are touching, just notice the sensation of your feet touching whatever they're touching. Remember to breathe. Now let's just do a quick check-in about what feelings are coming up right now, just in this moment. Just get familiar with that. And whatever it is, it's okay. If you're feeling anxious, you're feeling sad, angry, afraid, all of those are okay. There's not a problem. It might not feel good, but it's okay to feel those things. So in just a moment, I'm going to ask everyone to open your eyes. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and we'll come back together. So I want to ask, as much as possible, that everyone, again, just be aware of what's happening for you and do what you need to do for yourself. So I want to get a sense of where people are right now, just in terms of what's coming up for them, any emotions, because again, this can be a challenging thing to talk about. So if people can, in the chat, just put one word, one feeling that's coming up for you, that would be really helpful, if you're comfortable.
As it relates to suicide, you're suggesting, Dr. Collins?
No, whatever you're feeling right now in this moment, whatever feeling. Okay, that's real. Tired, sleepy, anxious, anticipation, peace. Okay, you already have a little bit of a range. And relaxed, relief, loved, scared. Okay, yeah. Anxious a little. So there's a lot of anxiety, and again, whatever it is, just make a note of it. Okay, so grateful. Thank you all. All right, so in terms of sort of what I had planned for today, I want to start by talking about the why of suicide, why people complete suicide. And then I want to talk about why it's hard to talk about. And I want to hear from you all about some of your ideas about why it's hard to talk about, because it can be a little bit different for everybody. Talk about why we do need to talk about it. And then I'll share a few statistics. I don't want to get too statistic heavy. And I think in the coming weeks, there's going to be another presentation on suicide here. So might get some more into statistics there. I'll talk about the warning signs, what people might be doing that indicates that they might be thinking about suicide or planning suicide. I'll talk about some risk factors and then also some protective factors. I think a lot of times we talk about, well, what makes a person at risk? It's also important to think about and know what protects a person, what makes it less likely that someone will think about or complete suicide. And then we'll talk about how we can help, what we can do if we're concerned about someone. Okay, so why do people, so before I go forward, I wanna just talk a little bit about language. So you might have noticed that I'm going to avoid saying commit suicide. Commit suicide, I think feels very sort of, when we think of commit, we sometimes think about committing a crime. So it can feel very shaming and very carceral. And we want to avoid shaming and we want to avoid punishment with this topic. So instead I'm going to say complete suicide, and I encourage everyone to think about that. I also want to clarify another term that comes up, and that is self-harm or harming oneself. And those are, sometimes self-harm is talked about in place of suicide, but it's really a very different thing. It's a very different thing. So suicide is the ending of one's own life, and there are different reasons that it happens. Self-harm happens for different reasons also. Sometimes people do it, oftentimes people do it as a relief. It's a relief from the emotional pain that people might be feeling. So we don't want to confuse those terms. Any questions so far?
I have questions.
Yes.
Okay, so you look like you're much younger than me, so I'm gonna ask you this question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of dividing the world in terms of pre-affirmative action and post-affirmative action. And when I say that, I'm talking about people having opportunities after affirmative action that puts them in more materialistic, monetary world versus pre-affirmative action where people didn't have the opportunities, disposable income, all of those things that like people were more important than things. It was more of a collective spirit. And so I'm wondering if you don't have it, if you can get it later on, I'm wondering in terms of those people who engage in this, who decide to make this move, what their socioeconomics are, right? What their socioeconomics are, particularly for Black people, right? What their socioeconomics are in terms of really poor people, homeless people, you know, to the extent that information is available. And I say this because I'm very aware, my benchmark has always been the fact that my father's grandmother, who was a chattel slave, raised him. So, you know, I always said that after everything she's been through, there's nothing, there's no reason for me, especially when I, you know, as much as I know, not that I know everything about, you know, 600 years in this continent, but I'm very, very aware. And so that's why I ask about, you know, I divide it in terms of post affirmative action, when you have opportunities, access to extra money, and then pre, when those opportunities, and I guess it's two things. One is the socioeconomics in terms of those people who make this decision. And then what's the difference, to the extent we have the information, in terms of people pre affirmative action when you didn't have opportunity. And you know, I always tell people, I grew up with people who were sharecroppers, right? And so, you know, you made a way out of no way. And so, you know, if you understand what I'm saying? It's two.
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah, and that's a really good question. So to answer the socioeconomic question, especially for Black folks, people of lower socioeconomic statuses are more likely to think about and complete suicide. And that's just because of the high level of stress. And there might be also higher levels of hopelessness because there's a lack of access to resources, and there might be a real lack of access to help. And you know, in terms of sort of where we are now and where we have been in terms of our rights, suicide, thinking about and completing suicide has increased a lot for our people over time, and that's for a lot of different reasons. There is, in general, for all people, there's a higher, there are different unique stressors these days. Part of that has to do with the media. Some of that has to do with concerns about climate change. There seems to, in some ways, be more going on globally. So I hope that starts to answer some of your question, and we'll come back to some of it, I think, as we go on. Thank you for that. Okay, so I want to get in a little bit to why people complete suicide, or why they think about it. So when somebody is thinking about suicide, they are feeling really hopeless. They're feeling really alone. They often don't have access to help. They might be feeling a lot of shame. They might be feeling a lot of guilt, and they might be feeling as if they don't have anyone to talk to. And I'll mention later that social support is a huge protective factor. So when people are feeling isolated, alone, or when they're feeling misunderstood, they are at particular risk. And oftentimes, people who complete suicide, they don't necessarily want to die. They want an end to their pain. And they don't know an end to their pain. They can't find an end to their pain, or sometimes they're hoping that just a part of them will die. But it seems that the only option is to complete, to take the next step in going forward. And for many people, it's not an easy decision. And there are often a lot of things that people do before they complete suicide. And I'll talk more about that too. It typically isn't sudden. There are typically some warning signs. So I want to talk a little bit about why it's hard to talk about. So I saw something in the chat that I want to come back to. So intense pain. People want an end to their pain. And yes, people from all income backgrounds definitely do are at risk or do complete suicide. But there is some research showing that people from lower SESs are more likely. The research changes all the time because sort of the world is changing all the time. So let me see. Okay, so in terms of the question of why we maybe don't talk about it, yes, I just see this 988 number. I'm going to come back to that. Let me just say it now since I'm on it. So rather than calling 911, if you're concerned about someone having a mental health crisis, you can call 988. And then people who are trained, as opposed to the police who are not trained, will respond to somebody having a crisis. So yeah, that's effective as of 7/16. Thank you so much, Dr. White. All right, so in terms of why we don't talk about this, there is a lot of stigma. So there is stigma, unfortunately, in general, of mental health concerns in general. The Black community is we've come a long way, but it is still there. Another reason we don't talk about suicide is that we don't typically like talking about death. It's a very final thing, and there's a lot of fear around it. There's a lot of uncertainty about it. Another reason we don't talk about it is related to a myth that I want to dispel, and I'm going to come back to this a couple times. Sometimes we don't talk about it because we are afraid that talking about it will increase the likelihood that somebody will do it. That's not true. So by talking about suicide, you are not going to put the idea into somebody's head. That's been debunked many, many times. So it's better to talk about it than not, because if we're not talking about it, there's not anything we can do about it. If we're not talking about a problem or a challenge, it's very, very difficult to address it. We need to talk about it because it definitely happens. So I want to be paying attention to the chat, and I really like how engaged everybody is.
Dr. Collins, can you, I just posted an article there for everybody to read. It was in, I think, Time Magazine, and it talked mostly about, it focused on Chesley Chris, who was the beautiful Black woman who had everything going for her and still committed suicide. So it talked a lot about the circumstances for Black people to commit suicide are different than the circumstances for. It actually said the largest population to commit suicide are white men. Mm-hmm. But it also said, which I thought was interesting, that in the last couple of years, the number for white people committing suicide is decreasing. The numbers for non-white people are going up, and we can all think about why. So can we talk about that? And it also talked about the incidence of suicide amongst young people. So can you hit on just some of those topics, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is true, and it's been true for some time, that white people are more likely to complete suicide. In the last few years, the incidences of Black people completing suicide has risen much more than other groups. So there is a real crisis in our community. So between 1991 and 2019, the instances of our adolescents, Black adolescents, completing suicide rose 80%. So again, 80% within about 20 years. And within that time, the prevalence and the number of attempts didn't increase for people of other races and ethnicities. There are also some gender differences there. There are gender differences in general, and there are differences, gender differences for Black people as well. So in terms of youth, between 2013 and it was 2019, the suicide rate of our Black boys and men, 15 to 24, boys and men 15 to 24, rose by 47% and 59% for Black girls and women of the same age. So the really big increases so for our youth. So in terms of gender difference, to go further with gender differences, men are more likely to complete suicide. And one of the main reasons for that is that they are more likely to use more lethal means. So that means that they're more likely to use means that will actually end in death. So whereas women might be more likely to use pills, suffocation, men are much more likely to use firearms, which are more likely to end in death. Interestingly, though, women are more likely to have thoughts about suicidality, thoughts about taking their lives. I'm gonna just come back to the chat. Another thing I do want to say is that a majority of Black adults who go on to complete suicide do not get mental health care within the prior year. And that has to do, again, with, these are all complex things. That has to do with lack of access to healthcare. We're much less likely to go to the doctor, much less likely to have a primary care physician. There also, of course, is the stigma, not wanting to talk about it, not knowing how to talk about it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Higgy. So let's see. I want to read something from Max Sharp. I believe Black people don't talk about suicide because it may challenge our faith. Yes, thank you for that. We Christians believe God has the final say and that he will end our life here on earth when it's our time to go, and we don't have that right. So that is, that's a really interesting point. And you're talking about suicide versus completing it. So people who have who practice faith and spirituality actually are less likely to complete suicide, and that's because they have this. That's a significant source of support for people. And yes, there's also the concern about the implications of suicide if you're a person of faith. Let's see. I'm just trying to, there's so many good things coming in the chat. Is there such thing as fast versus slow suicide? I see that question. Lenny, would you be able to expound on that a little bit? If not, I think one thing that comes to mind is that there typically is some preparation for suicide. People
that is not what I was talking about, though.
Okay.
What I was talking about is this. There's some people who feel so bad about what's going on in their life that they start doing things that are destructive, i.e. drinking, drugs, or even actions that are destructive, and can go off and lead to completion of suicide. That's what I was talking about, fast versus slow. For example, a person who drinks a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I would consider slow suicide.
Oh, that's a good question. So that's interesting because suicidality, there's the intent to die. And yes, drinking over time, depending on what you're doing and your other health, that definitely can kill you. But in order for it to be suicide, there has to be this desire to end one's life.
I guess what I think about that, very often the people I've known who have intended or have talked about suicide talk about relieving their pain.
Yeah.
And that's why they're thinking about completing suicide. So it's not always, I want to end my life, it's I want to get rid of the pain.
Yes.
But the only way they see to get rid of the pain is to complete suicide.
Right. Yes. Thank you for re-emphasizing that. Yes. And okay, I want to acknowledge that somebody disclosed that they have attempted suicide 4 times. I really appreciate that vulnerability and bravery. And if you are in need of support, I'm more than happy to talk with you after this. And I hope you do have some support. And yeah, we can definitely check in after. Okay, I want to come to some risk factors because that's something that people have started to talk about. So one of the things that we've come up a couple of times is this feeling of hopelessness. When someone feels hopeless, as if there's no chance for things getting better, things won't get better, there's no optimism, that is really concerning because at that point people really start to feel resigned. There are some unique, and that's for everyone, Black folks and non-Black folks. Specifically for Black folks, family conflict is a real risk factor because we tend to be a very family-oriented, on average, very family-oriented and collectivistic. And so when we lose that connection and support, it's especially difficult. Racism and discrimination, the experiences of that, can be really traumatic and really devastating. And we not only experience it, racism individually, we experience it collectively. And there in recent years, there's been so much focus, media focus on anti-Blackness, and exposure to that really can be traumatic. It can really be devastating. Wanted to mention about family. For Black folks specifically, divorce can lead to, is associated, I should say, with more thoughts about suicide because again, there's that loss of support. Lack of access to mental health care. I've mentioned that a couple of times. So mental health care isn't the only way to begin to feel better, but for many people, it's an important piece of the puzzle. And if we don't have that, it can be all the more challenging. People who have mood and anxiety disorders are more likely to think about, attempt, and complete suicide. That's not to say that it's going to happen, but it's more of it's more likely. And again, the feeling of just overwhelm and hopelessness is really a risk factor. And when people are having acute mental health concerns, that can happen for people. Also, if somebody has prior suicide attempts, there is a higher likelihood of risk. All right, I see, Judy, you have your hand raised, so I want to come to you.
Thanks, you actually just answered it. I was about to ask if you tried once, are you more likely to try again? And you just answered that. Thank you.
I have a question, Dr. Collins. Given the state of affairs mentally, physically, socially, all of that with COVID, is there documented what's happening? Are the incidents of, is there a correlation between the increase in suicide associated with the COVID pandemic situation?
Yeah, I don't know about specifically for COVID, but I can say for Black folks that
isolation, this being, it's been hard.
Yeah, and there are increased instances definitely of substance use, which is a risk factor, and anxiety and depression, and other mental health concerns can be exacerbated or have been exacerbated by a lot of the things that have happened with the pandemic, because the pandemic has just brought on monumental stress for individuals, families, communities, and stress can really trigger or can really worsen mental health concerns. So thank you for that.
Can I ask a quick question if you can hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Not to take anything, and this is a really serious situation. But I just want to throw this out, and I don't know how it means or if anybody's looked at it. But Black people were bred like animals. So the opportunity to have mental illness is quite possible for virtually all of us, right?
Yes.
Particularly after the end of the importation of chattel slaves, when they were breeding women and trying to get 70 children out of each one. So, our whole experience for the 600 years we've been here is, especially being bred like animals. When other people enter whatever, somehow they really get, they have serious, not that we don't, but I'm saying that it's amazing that we don't have more after what was done to us and how we were treated like animals. The other thing is I heard a young man say that we're in a cultural crisis, and it's and basically not only fleeing from our own culture, this provided us with the tools, not necessarily to address this specifically, but part of how we navigated the 600 years here, and how we're advancing other people's cultures at our peril. And the last thing is, and I guess this goes back to my first question about how I split stuff between pre-affirmative action and post-affirmative action. We're now living at a time where we have wicked vulture capitalism. I say that because, we grew up in capitalism, but it wasn't the wickedness that we have now in terms of everything's got a price on, everything is monetized, everything, right? And so that wicked vulture capitalism imposes expectations, or some people allow it to impose expectations on us that, maybe we should consider. And I'm just saying, have people look at, not that it, are people looking at these things? The fact that the capitalist system we live in, everything is monetized, and the pressure that puts on people. The fact we were bred like animals, like I said, trying to get 70 children out of one person. And then the cultural crisis of us abandoning the tools that our great grandmothers and our grandmothers and that have been passed down for 600 years, and actually taking on the culture of other people, not only taking it on, but advancing it, and as I said before, at our peril. So I don't know if anybody's looking at that.
Yeah, definitely. So you really make an excellent point. The first thing you said about, given what we have been through, it makes sense that we're having these reactions. We have experienced every level of trauma, collective trauma, intergenerational trauma, racial trauma. So I think it's really important to keep in mind what we
I'm not sure. And I thought it was too. Wait.
I can.
Is that you, Dr. Collins?
I hope not.
Okay. All right. Let me find out. If everybody can mute except Dr. Collins, unless you're speaking, you should be muted. Thank you. People on the phone, especially, make sure you're muted. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Collins.
No worries. Thank you for that. Yes. So because of the trauma we have been through, and trauma is a serious risk factor for suicidality, considering suicidality. And yes, capitalism is, I won't even really get started on that because it is a really corrosive thing, the way that it is being practiced now. And it's, that definitely has a negative effect on our global mental health. So thank you for that.
Can I piggyback on that question? When I think about the higher incidence of completion of suicide amongst young Black people, and I correlate that with what I think is their obsession with bling and, bling and material things. Do we think, and as Linda was saying, like somebody was saying that, during the 29 stock market crash, people were jumping out of windows because of things. But Black people were suffering, like, really? They jump and kill themselves over money? So are we there? I think that's where Linda's head was going with her question as well. So, is that what's happening with our young people? What is happening that they seem, and I hate to say more fragile, because I am truly a non-judgmental person about suicide. I think it's a very personal choice in someone's life, and I don't, yeah. So that's a whole nother story that I won't get into.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But do you see a correlation between the?
Yeah, I think that they have that specifically. That will be an interesting thing to look into. I think that it really has to do with the higher levels of, in some ways, the higher levels of trauma, and some of that has to do with some of it does have to do with social media. For a lot of reasons. Social media can really leave people feeling more isolated. And, we mentioned that isolation is a risk factor for suicidality. And then also the media has made it more possible for us to know about all the racism. We get it in different details now, and we see the videos of Black people being gunned down. And we know that young people spend a lot of time on social media. So that can really lead to feelings of overwhelm and hopelessness and helplessness. As far as the materialism, yeah, again, I don't know the specific answer to that, but since there is so much emphasis placed on the material things, if someone doesn't have them, and that's really what their self-worth is tied to, there's real concern there.
We have a person, and she's going to have to jump off soon, so I wanted to. Ruth is calling in from Japan. Ruth, do you mind if I call you out?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So I happen to know that the incidents of suicide are very high in Japan.
Yeah.
What do they attribute it to? I mean, I know that competition and success is just like the be all ends all. Can you talk a little bit about what the incidents of suicide are like in Japan, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I don't know the numbers in Japan, but yes, that their rates are very high, and a lot of people attribute that to the work-life culture balance or lack thereof. People working very, very long hours and not having time for leisure, rest, family. People just aren't meant to do that. We're not meant to be working 24/7. And then I think there is cultural beliefs play a role in it also. So I don't know the specific cultural beliefs, but if they're
Ruth actually lives there, so that's why I was asking her, does she have any?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. We actually see it in cycles. So for example, because there is so much pressure for young people who graduate to get that job. And so the start of the fiscal year is April. So around like April, if young people haven't been settled into their job, you see the rate of suicide going up. And then also you have to look at historically, back in the feudal area, suicide was considered an honor, where you had the shogunates who actually would kill themselves with their swords. So I think that death here is seen as something else. And then you have the fact that Dr. Collins is right, that even though you may have laws in place for people to take leave, annual leave, sick leave, the fear, there's like this fear factor that I got to go to work. I got to work till 11 o'clock at night. Right. Oftentimes, if I'm on the train and just out socializing, it is nothing to see but people just sleeping. In the morning, they're tired. In the evening, they're tired. Or in the evening, they're drunk. Because this is also a culture that you have a high rate of alcohol. Yeah. And all of these things are considered like stigmas that the culture doesn't allow you to talk about. It's just like kind of swept underneath the rug. But Japan is not the number one country, though. It is probably about the third or fourth country with the highest rate of suicide. I want to say that South Korea may be number one, but Japan is in the top 10. But it's just, you're right. A lot of it has to do with culture. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and attitudes about death and dying. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah.
Dr. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Dr. Collins.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'd like to introduce Deirdre Allette Asiema, and then have you come back.
That sounds great.
Because I'd like to have her come on, but I know people have a lot of questions and they really want to hear more answers.
Absolutely.
To that.
Yeah.
And I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. I just want to very, very quickly acknowledge Dion Monsanto. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name correctly, but you posted that you lost your daughter to suicide, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. And I'm glad that you are here together with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Collins, and we'll be right. Don't leave us, stay with us.
Okay, I would like to also introduce Deirdre Allette Asiema. She is a mental health advocate who is passionate about destigmatizing the subject of suicide in our community. Her involvement comes from her personal experience of losing her son, her only child, that's come to completing suicide after a long life and battle with mental illness. She has started a foundation. It is to help bridge education and resources, everything revolving around mental health. This through webinars, seminars, workshops, therapists, referrals, and wellness classes. To help other people who are going through that or know someone who is. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Deirdre Allette Asiema.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. Looks like I'm having feedback.
Do you have two devices on? Do you have your phone and your computer on?
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead, talk again. Let's see what happens.
Okay, thank you, Angela, again for that introduction. And thank you all for allowing me to share my story today. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with giving you a little synopsis of how I became here today, out at this place. So I want to start off by saying, no, Mom.
Take your time, it's all good. You're in good company. Take your time, take a deep breath. Dr. Collins, help us along with this.
Yeah, so no mom should ever know this excruciating pain of losing their child. It just should never be. You metamorphose into an unknown being. You become unknown even to yourself. When I was growing up, I felt sad almost daily. You will always find me smiling, but within I felt deep hurt. I prefer to stay alone in my room all day than to be around people. I didn't even know why, nor did I have a reason. I just couldn't understand what I was going through. It was something so minute that triggered me into having a suicide attempt. And no one never questioned me on why behind my actions. We swept it under the rug. My family, not even myself, wanted me to be classified as crazy because I was not crazy. Fast forward, I had my only child. Ironically, I gave Darren life. However, I needed Darren to live. Darren became my purpose, my reason to exist. I became a mom, still not understanding my own feelings, though, or seeking help for myself, putting myself on the back burner to care for my perfect gift. It wasn't until much later I learned mental illness can actually be hereditary. I began to see questionable behaviors, forgetting how I felt and the why behind my own childhood actions. Darren's cry for help became louder. At the time, I grew ashamed of his actions and behaviors. He wasn't the child I raised. My first thought, as many others, was he's misbehaving, right? It was the company he kept. It was everything and everyone's fault. I needed something or someone to blame. I needed to understand, but instead I focused so much on the what he was doing, and I lost complete sight of the why he was doing those things. Darren would say little things to me like, he can't wait for Jesus' return, or his mind is comparable to a train speeding by. Those were just a couple of things that he would say to me, and I had no clue how to respond to them. We visited a therapist where he was diagnosed. From that point, he was on and off several different medications. Of course, I had no understanding on the side effects of medication. At the time, I continued to pressure Darren into listening to the professionals and taking the medications as prescribed. Although he would continuously tell me how they were not working. After all, these are the professionals, right? Darren looked for alternative means to feel what society calls normal. This is where dabbling in drugs and alcohol came in, along with running around with the wrong crowd, which led him to several run-ins with the law. I did what I grew up doing, not talking about it, keeping what happens in our home to ourselves. My first mistake was not sharing with the right people. Combine everything Darren was going through, it contributed to multiple suicide attempts that I was able to set them all. My life at that point was only about keeping Darren alive. That in itself became a full-time job. Having to keep my phone on my persons at all times during work, heart racing every time the phone would buzz, a fear that it would be about my baby. They say faith without works is dead. Yet I didn't know what else to do but to continue pray, fast, and believe Darren will be healed. At this point, I slightly understood that Darren was dealing with depression, but what is depression? Where else do you go for help? What do you say to the person who struggles? I didn't know the answers. Darren succumbed to the battle of mental illness on January 7th, 2018. The day my life would forever be changed. I will be different. I am different. This is where the Darren Clark Jr. Memorial was established. I want so bad to help others to understand the emotions loved ones may feel and how they may show their pain and struggles in a way that is not understood by many. The organization is to be the bridge to education and resources on mental health. The end goal is to decrease the number of loved ones we lose to suicide due to mental illness. And I will share on how we do some of this in a minute. However, if you don't get anything else I've said this far, please get this and know that silence can destroy and take away loved ones' lives. And also, please seek help if you struggle with any form of mental illness. You are no good to your loved ones if you're not okay. And know that there are always resources available for you. Contact us and share our contacts with others. The more who knows we exist, the more we can help, which could result in losing less loved ones due to the struggles and shame associated with mental illness. So now I will share a little bit of how we do this. I will share my screen. Okay. So this is, like I said, we're the Darren Clark Jr. Memorial. We are the bridge to education and resources on mental health. We are a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2018. we do what we do because we want to eradicate the stigma around mental health. No person should ever struggle alone. No one should ever suffer in silence, no one. And I want to so badly eradicate that stigma and let those who struggle know that there are resources and it's okay to talk about it. And we bring education and resources on mental health, and you will see how in a minute. Some of the mental health programs we offer are webinars and seminars. Some are suicide prevention webinars. We have other mental health wellness webinars. We actually have one coming up in October on drugs, alcohol, and mental health. We also have programs for youth, particularly for youth, where we did a mental hop for the youth, which was pretty successful. Programs too, we have wellness classes. Now, we all know mental health starts with the mind, right? But the mind can affect our bodies and our soul. So I found yoga, right? And this was, I found yoga. And we offer this yoga class every Monday, 6:30 to 7:30 for our active supporters. And as we know, yoga, it's just so beneficial for your mind, your body, and your soul, literally. I have personally used a lot of what I practice in yoga in my everyday life with my high anxiety, or, when I feel myself about to have a breakdown, I will use those breathing techniques. I will try to bring myself back to the present. So a lot of what I practice in yoga, I implement that in my everyday life, and not to mention the health benefits that it has. My body feels a lot differently than it did 2 years ago when I started this. We also have the Darren's Gallery support group, which is every last Tuesday of the month. We meet virtually, and I wanted to say the yoga class is also virtual. We meet virtually with the Darren's Gallery. It's called Darren's Gallery because Darren was an amazing artist, really great with his hands, and I wanted the support group to identify that with that. Program 3, we have trainings and workshops. We offer mental health first aid training. For those who do not know, that's just exactly what it is, a first aid training where you learn how to deal with someone who may be in crisis, what to say to them, what not to say to them, the signs and behaviors that they may have. This is so essential for everyone, even if you don't have someone in your life who struggles with mental illness. You may come across someone in the street who may be having an episode, and you can identify with them and be able to bring them back down into the present, right? We also offer Narcan training. As we know, a lot of times people will use drugs as a means to cope with what they're feeling, and especially when medication may not seem to be working the way they want it to. Our next program we have is therapist match. We do a lot of therapy matching. I find helping others get that therapist that they need, they're more to go and get the therapy. So I just take information, what their preferences, who they would like to see, where, if it's virtual, if they even offer virtual, even especially their insurance, because I feel like mental health services should be affordable. And I look for what is in their network first. And if they don't have insurance, I look for places that can accommodate them. So I do a lot of that and had a lot of success with it, which I'm really, really happy about. We also have the Darren Clark Jr. Art Scholarship, where we give a scholarship to graduating high school students who are going into the art field. Why? Because Darren was an amazing artist. And we've been given this scholarship since 2018. We also have our Stigma Stomper. I would love for everyone here on here to take the Stigma Stomper. So our Stigma Stomper is my personal language where, you know, you're not going to fall prey to the stigma of mental illness. You are going to, you know, be different and make the difference and make that change. So you don't use words like crazy. You don't use words like using mental illness as adjectives, you know, because they're not. They're real diseases. We're not going to shun somebody when they're exhibiting signs of mental illness. You're going to go up to them, ask them what you can do, help them, you know, even refer them to someone who can help them. Once you take the Stigma Stomper, you get a little certificate signed by me. And that you can find on our website. So now I'm on to our projects. Our projects consist of Kenya right now and Congo. Right now, I'm going to talk about Kenya. My husband's from Kenya, which is why the significance there. And so we travel to Kenya often. And the last maybe 3 times I went, 3 years ago, maybe, or 2 years ago, I saw a great need in Kenya with mental health. And even today, their suicide rates are increasing drastically. So there was this boys' home, which you will see here under Kenya, where, and you see the facility, where I had a webinar on mental health with them. I also had a psychiatrist there with me to talk the statistics and, you know, give the medical terms. The significance of this picture here, you don't see his face. This young boy right here, after I gave him his clothes, after the seminar, I gave him his clothes, because another thing, we give clothing out to them as well. So I gave him his clothes, he got his shoes, and he said to me, he said something to me, and I didn't hear him. So I said, what was that? And he said, you're a good mom. And it touched me. And it really wasn't until I went back to the hotel and woke up the next day. And I was like, he said, I'm a good mom. Like, where did that come from? So I like to believe that was Darren speaking through him. However, that same kid, the picture over here next to it, this is him in the middle. He had left his home since he was 7 years old. 7 years old. After this webinar, the next weekend, he asked the leader to go back home. And this is a picture of him and the family. That alone just make it so much worth it, what I do. But on the right, we have Salvation Army Children Home. That's a picture of them receiving the clothing that I brought over to them. And in this picture here, where you see some clothes hung, some on bags, and the walls empty, they originally had their clothes on the floor in bags. So I created a closet room for them. So that whole entire room became a closet, and that's how they hang their clothes now that they receive the donations. Project 2 is Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. Again, I had a webinar with them, and unfortunately, after the webinar and they came up, everyone came up to introduce themselves, they were asking me for essentials. They were asking me for clothes. They were asking me for food. They were asking me for a place that all the orphanage can stay together and instead of being in separate homes as they are right now. And in those homes, they don't even eat every day. So what I did was, what is that saying? You know, you give someone a fish, they eat for a day. You teach them how to fish and they will eat for long term. That's what I did here. I decided, okay, I'm not going to always give you money or donate money for your, for you to feed them. You're going to have to learn how to continue to feed them. So we gave them money, started money to start farming. And this is some of the crops, the produce that they produced from the farming. And now the children eat a lot. They eat 5 times a day, 5 times a week with the group, as a group. The other 2 days they eat with their families, the foster families. So this is an ongoing project that I'm doing with them. Our future project, Mind and Youth Mental Health. I am actually working on having a youth program, something that is signature to the Darren Clark Jr. Memorial. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of thought behind it, but once it happens, I know it's going to be great with all the support we have from everyone. And of course, global outreach. We are already in the States, we're in Africa, and I'm looking for us to reach people at every continent. I want the world to know who Darren is. I want the world to know why our organization exists. It's because of his loving heart. It's because of his kind soul. It's because that he was so selfless, and despite anything, I mean, from his last days, part of his text to me was, now I can live the life I deserve without a deterrent. How selfless is that? So I want the world to know who he is in every continent. Our accomplishments. So far, we have town proclamations in a few towns, Bloomfield, Madison, and Springfield. And that proclamation is just to recognize that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but this proclamation allows me to do certain things in those towns during Mental Health Awareness Month. Our next big accomplishment was our state proclamation. I've created Invisible Pain Day. Invisible Pain Day is January 7th every year. And it's a day that we commemorate all those we lost to suicide due to mental illness. It's also a day that we support and encourage the surviving loved ones, because it's been 5 years since Darren, but I still need that support. I still need that encouragement from time to time. Well, not from time to time, a lot of times. And I find that, gradually the support dwindles, and rightfully so, because everyone has their lives to live, but we still need that support. So I created this day where we will all come together and support one another while remembering our loved ones, because our loved ones will live forever in our hearts. And I'm really excited about this because our very own Governor Murphy, was the one who signed this into proclamation, proclaiming that January 7th is Invisible Pain Day. I would like to say I also had the honor of doing this with NAMI, New Jersey. So the good part, how can you help? You can either donate your time. We always need volunteers, whether it's to be on our team or whether it's to help us with our fundraisers or events. You can volunteer for the events, being a part of the team, monetary donations through sponsorships. We have sponsorships that you can do where you can even determine where your funds will go to, whether it's to Africa, where it is to more programs, whatever it is. We also have company match program. Oh, I really encourage you, if your employer offers company match, the match program, please add us to that match program. Any donations we get from that company made through the company, we will actually get double. So why not double your donation? You could also donate clothes, because as you saw in Africa, we send the clothes to Africa, to those who really who needs it. And any other fundraiser events, you know, we have a lot of fundraiser event. Well, actually, one fundraiser event a year where we get prizes together to do a tricky tray. And that's how we fund most of what we're doing. So thank you. The Darren Clark Jr. Memorial Team. Here is our information. Please follow us, share us with others, friends and family. Let them know we exist. Anything that you need. You know, there are a plethora amount of resources out there, and people do not know. I didn't know. So I am that bridge, that liaison for the people and the resources. Okay, I am there. So anything I can do, please reach out to me. Our phone number is there, our email is there, our website is there. You could take a look at that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to bring Angela back in. Angela, I'm going to add you to the spotlight. I'm going to add Dr. Collins to the spotlight. While we're doing that, Ms. Asiema, if you can peruse the chat, there were lots of questions that were being posted. And
I will.
Her talking. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. That was so brave of you, and your strength gives strength to other people. There's no question in my mind that you touched the hearts and of people on this call and gave other people the strength that they need to do what you're doing. Angela, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say something.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to echo what Ms. Higgy had said, and I know that I have family members that do suffer from depression. I have a son who suffers from depression and has talked, you know, about suicide. So I'm totally get what you're doing. I think it's phenomenal what you're doing and your foundation. So I just want to thank you for sharing that today. I think it was brave. It was just to be doing what you're doing, not only in this country, but worldwide. I think it's awesome. I really do. So however I can help, I definitely will. And I wanted to open the floor so that all of the people who are here today can ask Dr. Collins or Ms. Asiema if they have questions. I'd like to turn the floor over to everyone so that we can continue with that.
Yeah, one question I have for, it's so funny, Ms. Asiema, I'm pretty, when you told the story of the young man in Kenya who went back to his family after meeting you, I thought it was your son as well.
Thank you. I want to believe that. Thank you.
That was the first thought. So I understand how you got into Kenya. How did you end up in the Congo?
Okay, so Congo, they actually reached out to me via Facebook. They were reaching out to several different people to see, you know, where they could get help. It's they have an orphanage. It's an orphanage with 40 children, and they struggle there. So they were just looking to see who can help. You know, after they saw what I was doing in Kenya, so they figured they'd call me. Yeah. Yeah, and I you know, it took me some time before I even, you know, supported them financially with, you know, with the farming. I just needed to make sure they were on point, on the jet, you know, and everything else. And yeah, but they are, and they show me the produce, so I'm excited about it.
So have you been there yet?
Not yet, but we do plan on going. Yeah. Now that Congo is part of the Eastern Africa, so it'll be easy from Kenya now to Congo. Yeah.
And didn't they just discover a large pot of gold in Congo?
I have no idea, but
that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But
right.
Topic, and either of you can answer this question. You talked about the therapist match that you do. And when you began talking earlier, something you said earlier had triggered the question for me. And if both of you can, either or both of you can answer this question, how important is it to have a therapist that you can relate to culturally or gender-wise, or does that matter? Dr. Collins? Okay.
To me, well, I'm going to let Dr. Dana say it, but to me personally, it does help having someone who understands you culturally, but most importantly is someone who can understand you and you mesh well with them. Because I always say, I tell people, you know, when I'm helping them find a therapist, finding a good therapist is like dating, right? You have to continue until you get that right one. And unfortunately, you'll have to tell your story, you know, several times before you get to that person. But I think it's really who you will connect with as well. Dr. Dana.
Yeah, I agree with that. There is some research, and I like to talk about research, showing that Black people benefit from meeting with other Black people. But I think Deirdre is really right, that it's important that you have a connection with a therapist and somebody who understands you. And it's my therapist is white, and she's great. It's really about the connection. And, you know, if you are going to see a non-Black therapist, you just want to ensure that the person has some cultural humility and cultural awareness. And I think the fact, what Deirdre said also about finding a therapist is really important. It's very, very difficult to find a therapist. 4% of therapists, or psychologists, I should say, in the US are Black. I'm not sure about therapists of other profession, how many of them are Black, but there are not very many of us. So you don't want to not get care because you're not able to find somebody who shares your identity.
So we're talking about young people completing suicide or attempting suicide. So this question, I guess, is for both of you, but Dr. Collins specifically, what is the obligation of a therapist to alert the parents regarding suicide attempts or ideation with a minor child? Does that vary state to state, or is there what is the obligation to tell the parents?
Yeah, that's a good question. Typically with older teens, the therapist will suggest that the teen tell the parents, or that they tell them together, and they can help them decide how to do that. But there is an obligation, because there is an obligation to warn the authorities, which can be very challenging. But whenever reporting to someone else or letting someone else know that the client or the child is considering or is at risk of suicide, it's really important that the therapist has a conversation with the teen or the child before they do it, so they aren't just blindsided. And again, they can talk about, maybe we can do this together. And that's because one thing we don't want, care providers, therapists don't want to do, is to do anything that's going to lose the trust of the child. So by talking to them about it beforehand, some of that trust and relationship can be preserved. But yeah, there is an obligation there.
Miss Helen, can I ask a question, please?
Please.
I put something in the chat. I have a niece, and she lost her daughter to COVID on Christmas morning. And when she called to tell me that her daughter did not make it, she said, basically, take care of Bryce, find someone to take care of Bryce. I'm not going to do this life. I'm pretty much done. And she's been saying that since Christmas. I think one of the hardest things to do in life is to lose a child. It's a certain type of pain that I don't think anyone can understand unless they've lost a child. So my niece has resources. She's actually very wealthy. She's been married for over 20 years. She's deeply, deeply depressed. She does have a group that she meets with on Saturdays. She has I think she needs another psychiatrist, psychologist. She's looking for one to meet with. You know, the family is trying to find all kind of resources for her. We have a family trip that's scheduled in the next couple of weeks. So my question to you, Dr. Collins, what other resources can we have for my niece, April? What can we do as a family? Because she's very sad. She's very hopeless. She tries to stay busy, but it's very difficult. And I think she's holding on because she doesn't want her son to be without a mom.
Yeah, thank you for that. The social support and knowing that people care is so important. And sometimes just knowing that someone is there, someone wants to listen is the best thing, because people who are struggling with that kind of sadness don't necessarily always need for us to do something specific for them. Sometimes they just need a listening ear. And I think it's also really important to be validating and affirming, validating of her feelings and empathic, and assuring her that, yes, this is a really, really devastating thing that you are contending with. And it makes sense that you're feeling sad, that you're feeling overwhelmed. And I think it's also really important to give her and give other people time to feel sad. You know, oftentimes there's the want to make people feel better right away. And, oh, don't be sad, don't cry. But people need to feel some of that. And people sometimes can't be quote unquote strong. There, I could talk about that on, but sometimes people just need to feel what they're feeling.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ms. Asiema, maybe you can address that. Can you talk about your feelings of despair and sadness and how you got through it?
I don't think she heard you, Helen.
Ms. Asiema, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry, did you say something? I didn't hear you.
Oh, yes. And you know, and Jackie is a reverend. So, you know, I'm sure that that's a challenge for you dealing with it. So that's interesting, because I'm sure you hear this a lot. And now it's family, so it doesn't make a difference. But Jackie was sharing that her niece is having a really difficult time with her loss. And she was asking Dr. Collins how she got through it. And I thought maybe you could share, if you don't mind, what were your stages of grief and how you got to the point where you are now, you know, and how was your family able to help you?
So for me, I understand exactly what the person is saying, because I've said it a number of times myself. It's still, I have to say, it's still difficult, right? It's an ongoing thing that I deal with, because, you know, I'm dealing with my own issues, and then on top of that, the grief. So it's just ongoing, and it's having that great support system. I have a really good support system. My husband first and foremost, if it wasn't for him, right? And then I have very close family and my team members from the organization, and all my support is like, you know, what I do is actually therapeutic for me as well. So me helping others and preventing them from going through what I have gone through or what I'm going through, it's comforting to me, and it helps me. So maybe, first of all, having that great support system, you know, and then maybe finding something that you can do that will, you know, just channel that, you know, that grief into something good. Yeah, that's what I could say. But that's actually what I do. So I don't know anything else.
Jackie, can you address that? You know, being a pastor, I'm sure that you've had to deal with members of your congregation who are dealing with grief and ideation of suicide and things of that nature. How do you deal with it as a pastor? Or do you refer it out to one of the mental health professionals?
Well, I definitely talk with them one-on-one. And if I do feel the need to refer it out, I certainly will refer them to a mental health professional. It's very difficult dealing with all types of grief. And for me, I actually did the eulogy for my niece in early January. And there were over thousands of people on the Zoom. And the church was at capacity for COVID. You know, I think that, you know, it takes a village, you know, to offer support. This, you know, going through stress, going through grief, going through loss, we don't know what someone is feeling. We don't know the depths of their pain. But when they verbalize that I don't want to do this life, I don't want to be here, I think that's a real telltale sign that they are in a real serious situation. So for my members, for my church members, they're mostly the elderly, and there is a higher depression rate now with elderly folks, particularly post-COVID. I don't know the numbers on it, but I just know from my congregation, you know, we try to do things in community. I talk with them, I pray with them, and if I see that it's very serious, I will refer them to a mental health professional.
Thank you. I'm going to do something that we need to celebrate in the middle of all of this. Dr. White, do you mind if I bring you on screen? Dr. White? Viva, I know she's here. The reason I wanted to bring her on screen is Viva was with us some months ago, probably last summer, because we've been doing this for those of you who have not been here before. We've been meeting this way, dealing with just our own issues amongst ourselves since March 2020. So hats off to all of us, right, for still being here. But she was one of our early guests early in COVID, and she was not a doctor at that time. She was I think an LSCW training, and she's gotten her PhD since then. And I know, isn't that exciting? So I just wanted to give her her props, and maybe she wants to partake in this conversation with us a little bit now that she's a PhD. But anyway, if you want to, I don't see you, Dr. White, but I see you're on here, but maybe you don't want to come on screen, and that's fine. But for those of you, can you all just show her some love in the chats, because she uses time constructively and got her PhD. So I'm very proud of her. Back to our conversation. I don't see any hands raised. Does anyone have any questions for either of our guests, or just comments that you want to make? I see a lot of people sharing personal stuff in the chats about your own experiences, which is brave. And this is, you know, the place for us to talk about it. And as Black folks, you know, it is one of the stigmas that we have in our community. So this is an important conversation for us to have. And, you know, I teach, oh, okay, Dion, go ahead. You have a question? You're on mute, Dion.
I just wanted to find out, since we signed up, will we find out about this going forward, if you're going to continue to meet like this, since it was my first time joining, because I do think it was valuable.
Yes. So I didn't do a good job, I guess. I just assume that people know who we are and what we do. So this is when Black women gather, and it's a place for Black women specifically to come together and share wisdom and knowledge and tradition, and a safe space to talk about whatever it is that's affecting us. And we talk about all kinds of things, from politics to mental health to, you know, what it means to go through menopause, the whole bit. So just really, really great conversations. And once you attend one of my meetings, I have everybody register because I capture your contact information and you become a part of my mailing list. And you are more than welcome to drop in anytime that you wish. We normally meet every Sunday during the summer. I'm giving myself a mental health break and we're meeting every other Sunday. Unless there's something really pressing, then of course we will meet weekly because it's about all of us here. So this is a space for all, for Black women. And we invite Black men into our circle so that we can talk about things that affect us as a community. And that's why Black men, unfortunately, at the last minute, I included them in this call, but I try and include them whenever. They're always welcome, but sometimes, it's just women. We just need to talk amongst ourselves. And I think Black men need to just talk amongst themselves. I wish there were a forum like this, and there probably is. I'm just not aware of it, but I think they need this as much as we do. And we've been doing this. I don't even know how many programs we've had, but we've had a lot. And it started out with just 20 women maybe on a Sunday who were going stir crazy in our houses during COVID to this becoming a weekly event. And it's really kind of rare that we have less than 100 women, sometimes as much as 200 women. And as you see, there are people calling in from around the globe, which is very wonderful because we were not able to do that prior to being online. So it's just really good. So thank you for coming. I see you left some information in there about an event that you're having. This is a place where you can share that kind of information as well. So thank you so much. Dr. Collins, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things really quickly that I didn't get to that people might be wondering about. So we talked a little bit about things people might be doing before completing suicide. And if you notice that someone has started to, after a long period of depression, start to feel a lot better or feel more energetic, that might actually seem like a good thing initially. But what might have happened is that the person has decided, I'm going to complete suicide, and I found an answer, so they're starting to feel better. And also, they now have more energy, and it takes energy to complete suicide. The other thing I wanted to say is that if you are concerned about someone close to you having a mental health crisis, or that if you're concerned about them engaging or attempting or completing suicide, it's really important to express concern in a non-judgmental and non-shaming and non-minimizing way. It's important to be straightforward about it when you're concerned that somebody might be thinking about suicide. So you want to avoid asking, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Because as I mentioned, that's a different thing. The language really should be, have you thought about killing yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? Do you have a plan for suicide? I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Helen, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that. And I was saying, George, I see your hand. I'll get to you in 1 second. I actually teach an ethics class to future human service workers, which are social workers and police officers and those kinds of people. So can you all talk about the professional obligation that people have, mandated reporters, we call them. So can you talk about that for a minute? Just the obligation that's, sometimes depending upon what your job is, you don't have a choice. You have to report these kinds of things, particularly with young people, with kids.
Yes. So mandated reporter, different kind of mandated reporters. Teachers are mandated reporters, typically. Therapists, mental health providers, and primary care doctors are mandated reporters. And that means that if a patient or a client if there's serious concern that they are at imminent risk of suicide, a report has to be made, and that's typically to 911. So imminent risk means that somebody not only wants to complete suicide, but they have a specific plan and they want to do it, and they have want to do it in the near future. So if somebody says, well, I want to commit suicide and I want to do it by shooting myself, and I apologize for using that triggering language, I'm sorry. But if they don't have the means to carry out their plan, there's a little bit less of a concern about imminence. There's still concern, but there's less concern about imminence. If they say, I don't want to be here anymore, but they don't actually want to die and they don't have a specific plan, that's more concerning. Now, if somebody says, I want to kill myself, they have a specific and lethal plan, they have a specific time they're going to do it, that really means imminent risk, and 911 will need to be called. And even if a provider calls 911, it still is a good idea to call a crisis prevention line, such as the suicide prevention hotline. And when calling 911, 911 will typically send out EMS or police officers. It's important to ask that they send somebody who is trained in crisis intervention. And it's also important to let 911 know that if the person's unarmed, let them know that. Let 911 know that, so they know that there's less of a risk, because we know that 911 often can be overzealous.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Mr. Lennon, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Hi, welcome.
Okay. Hi, it's almost midnight here in Germany. I just actually wanted to call and speaking to say thank you guys for doing this. Like I said in the chat, I'm in the Air Force. I'm stationed in Germany, and in the Air Force alone in 2020, we had a crazy amount of suicides just in the Air Force, active duty, reserve, and National Guard. I think it was like 81, 12, and 16 just in 2020. And we had like stand downs where we talked about it. But unfortunately, what happens is we only care about things when they're popular to care about them. So we had stand downs to talk about suicide, just like we had stand downs to talk about racial disparity after George Floyd was murdered. But then that was it. It didn't happen again the next year, and that was it. So I really appreciate forums like this where we talk about it, especially in the Black community. Because like I said in the chat, when Miss USA completed suicide, as well as Regina King's son, I feel like it was in the news for maybe like a day and then on to the next thing. And I don't know if that's a society or a community issue because we don't like to talk about death, but I appreciate that you all are intentionally talking about it and trying to recognize the signs and create safe spaces for people to do that. And that's all I really wanted to say. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome. I appreciate your comments. One of the other things we do here and When Black Women Gather, I've gotten away from it for the summer, but the third Sunday of every month, we dedicate that time. I'm talking to you, George, so don't leave me right now. We dedicate time talking to Black people who live in other places around the globe. So if you don't mind, I would love to be able to reach out to you and maybe you and some of the other Black folks that you've met there in Germany, and we can do a call on that. Are you interested? Did I lose him?
Nope, absolutely. That sounds good.
Okay, so I'll have your information from the chat. So I'll follow up with you on that. And thank you and welcome and appreciate your service. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the support.
Yes. Any other questions for our guests? I'm trying to peruse the chats. Some people are saying they're not seeing the names, but I guess maybe that was a fluke for the one person. Okay. Any other questions for our two guests?
I just have a quick question for Ms. Asiema.
Yeah.
On your logo, there is something written about pain on the brain. What was that on that logo?
It says not all pain is visible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So that's a trademark slogan we have, not all pain is visible. And I can give you a little story behind the logo. The logo is an outline of my son, of Darren's face, and inside is the brain, obviously, with not all pain is visible in it. Darren one day had a drawing. It was a face, and on the brain, it had "Fear What You Know." And while I was in the hospital, I remembered that and said, that's what my logo is going to be. And that's how this came about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like that. Very insightful. It's like the handicapped person, right? Same thing. We don't think, we see people hopping in the cars in the handicapped space and we're like, there's nothing wrong with her. Like, you just don't know because all pain is not visible. So thank you for that. I'll be using it, but I'll give you credit for it, I promise.
Yes.
Could I just say, maybe it's probably time for us to stop when somebody asks us how we're doing, to just say we're fine. Maybe it's time for us to stop that.
Yeah.
If we're not fine.
And that's so interesting because I was a sociology major, and I know we talked about that because we do. We say, hey, how you doing? And it's really just saying hi because we really don't want to know how you're doing. We don't want to stop long enough to hear how you're doing. And you know what, can we talk about as Black women, right? In this circle, Black people, but specifically there's a stereotype that Black women are strong, right? So we probably really don't deal with any ideations that we may be having around suicide. And do we even hear each other? That's a big question that I have. We are so conditioned to think that we're strong when one of us is reaching out for help. Can we hear one another? And I think we don't. And either of you can speak to that if you wish. And if not, we have a question from Lenny. Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
I guess my question is this. When I was younger, I always thought about all these people who commit suicide who are doing much better than I am. They have money, they have fame, they have all this stuff, and then they commit suicide. And it was hard for me to understand. I understand now suicide is personal. My question just to get to that is, how do you pick a therapist that is going to work, that is going to stop the completion? In our case, we had found the family member several times, stopped her, but we knew it was an ongoing process. And what we finally did is we said, we can't handle it ourselves, it's not working, but you need help. And we talked her into getting a therapist. And I guess we thought, well, wow, we did this, we made it. And all the therapist did was to make her feel comfortable about completing suicide. And so I guess I wondered, like, how do you pick a therapist? I mean, you don't just go down the book and say, eeny, miny, mo. And most of them don't advertise, I'm very good with people of color and the pressure they have or things like this. I guess in my heart, like many of the family, they felt the therapist did not really value our family. And that's why once they made her feel less guilty, their job was done. Actually, members of the family did not want to pay the therapist because they were very angry. And so I guess it always comes back to me. I mean, I've been told I stopped 4 people from killing themselves. I don't know how.
That's a good question, Dr. Collins.
I didn't really understand what happened, but they said I did it. And I'm like, good. But how do you pick a person?
What is the oath that you take, Dr. Collins, when patients, because, you know, there's this thing called self-determination. So how does that play into the whole situation of a client talking to you about seriously wanting to complete suicide?
Yes. So Yeah, we understand that clients definitely have autonomy. They have the right to do what they want to do. That ends though when they are at serious risk of harming themselves or someone else. And Lenny, to really answer your question, I really appreciate you sharing that, and I can understand the anger and the confusion and the sadness and the desire to really, how do we find somebody who's going to prevent it? The truth is that we can't guarantee that people are going to attempt or complete suicide. And that's particularly true if the person, again, really feels hopeless, if there are not any other answers. And people have to want to get help. People have to want another way. And if they don't, it's really challenging. But what is really important, I put this in the chat, is to make sure, ask the provider, the therapist, whether they are able to work with somebody who is struggling with suicidality, because not all therapists do, not all therapists are equipped to do that for various reasons. And then beyond that, it's really about the connection with the therapist. So it's really important that people like their therapist, and it's important that the therapy is focusing on what they want to focus on. If somebody is not really interested in therapy, though, usefulness will be limited. So as much as I wish that there were a way that we could prevent once and for all suicide, we haven't come to that. And if the person is an adult who is not gravely disabled, meaning that they're not able to, meaning that they are able-bodied and they are able to take care of themselves, there's very little that can be done to limit their rights. Wish I had a better answer.
Ms. Myers, I see your hand is up. Stacy?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you. I apologize for being late getting on, but I'm not sure if this question was answered or asked. I currently have a loved one. My mom lost her spouse a few years ago. And since the pandemic, she's retreated, and she doesn't want to speak to anyone at church. She doesn't have a lot of friends. People are dying off. I try to get her online with her church with the Zoom meetings, but she doesn't want to show her face or speak to anyone. And I'm seeing a decline in terms of just interacting one-on-one. And I was very concerned. So one of my appointments, one of her doctor appointments, I went with her, and I just told the doctor on the side, I said, can you please screen her? And she says, well, I can't do anything. I said, yes, you can. I'm not asking you for information. I'm giving you information so you can work with her. And I have no idea where to go in terms of the health insurance, anyone to just do a check on her. I have no clue. And I don't want to wait until something happens, because I see it going that way. Eating habits have changed, caring about the way they look, just regressing. And I know that maybe she will not speak to a therapist, but if someone called every now and again just to check on her, not to say I want to do it without her knowledge, but just to give her a lifeline, something, because she's not talking to me.
Yeah, that is a hard one. But you're right, it is really important that she has some connection and some support. And, I do want to say that if she's not willing to talk to you about her feelings or what's going on for her, she might be willing to talk about something less heavy. just the connection around what are you watching on TV, what are you reading can be really helpful. One option is the mobile crisis unit. I don't know where you are, but in New York, that's an option. They are able.
Yes, I'm in New York.
Yeah. So if you call NYC Well, are you familiar with NYC Well?
No.
Yeah,
but I will be.
Okay, great. I can put I can put it in the chat for you. They can do wellness checks either over the phone or in person. I'm trying to think what else. And then she can also call NYC Well herself. It's not therapy, it's support, and it's just support for people who are going through a number of things. And if she wants to, she can call as many times as she wants. It's 24 hours a day, it's confidential, as long as she's not reporting that she's at imminent risk. It is free.
Well, the reason why I think there may be a risk, because she said a few comments to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wish I wasn't here.
Yeah.
Those little things are starting to escalate more frequently. That's why I wanted to be a little bit more proactive.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yes, I mentioned NYC Well because it's confidential unless she discloses that, but that can be a really good source of support.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And if I can think of anything else, I will put it in the chat. But you know, even she may not talk to you, but I don't know if she texts or, you know, if she doesn't text. If she texts, you can just say something like, you know, I understand if you don't want to talk right now, just want to let you know I'm thinking of you. I love you. You can leave her voice messages. So reaching out in a way that she doesn't have to reach back out, just letting her know that thinking of you, I love you.
Okay.
That brings me to the
Thank
question of caregivers, people who are taking care of ill parents or just loved ones, and the stress that they're under. And I guess what I need to also say is that this is the second of a series of 4 discussions that we're going to do on mental health. So these kinds of things will come up again, but we might need to do a whole session just on the stress of caregiving, the stress that caregivers are under. And I don't know if that's on topic, but is there something that you can, that either of you can add or offer words of support to those people who find themselves in that situation?
Yeah, you know, that, Deirdre, I don't know if you want to add anything, but I'll say that is, that's not something I am as professionally familiar with. My grandmother, my 96-year-old grandmother, has Alzheimer's, and she's had it for some time. And I can see the toll that it takes on my mom, and it takes a toll on me also. So I can speak to it from that standpoint. There are a lot of caregiver, I shouldn't say a lot, because it really depends on where you live, but there are specific caregiver support groups, and oftentimes they are free because there's recognition that can really have an impact on our own mental and physical health. I would be happy to join and offer anything I can if I'm available.
Okay, Judy, I see your hand is up again.
Ms. Hege, I just wanted to piggyback on what Dr. Dana said, but yeah, they are support groups for caregivers, and I think that is essential, taking care of the caregiver, because it becomes a strain on you, right? It becomes a strain and affects your own mental health. As Dr. Dana, my mom is dealing with Alzheimer's. So I'm in that stage where she's in the moderate to severe stage. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress, but there are support groups. And I know even NAMI has one. If anyone is interested, they could definitely contact me and I'll get you that information.
Are there some support groups for people who have attempted suicide or?
Not that I'm aware of. There are support groups for people who are struggling with any form of mental illness. Specifically suicide, I am not 100% sure, but I can research that and let you know.
Might be something worth having. I don't know, just if you can get people to talk openly about it. And sometimes that helps, just knowing that, there's somebody else who we think we're alone in what we're going through. And sometimes just knowing that we're not is a whole lot that's therapeutic in itself. Judy, I see your hand is up, and S, I saw your hand. I don't know if you still wanted to ask your question or not, but.
Yeah, so this is probably not very comfortable, but isn't there a space where somebody who is probably very ill, somebody who is in intense pain, somebody who is probably much older, who has decided that they're really kind of ready to cross over? And because I know of some people who have decided not to eat anymore, they've just decided that this is it. I mean, they're not going to make a whole lot of effort to stay on this side. Is there I guess information on that?
I'm trying to figure out who that is. I thought it was you, Angela. I'm sorry, I muted Angela. Someone needs to mute. You have your TV on, and we can hear you. Not sure who it is.
Thanks to you, David.
We're just asking that everyone who's not speaking mute. So everybody mute unless you're me or Judy or Vicky. We'll do what we can.
It's Spy, I think. Okay, go ahead. There you go. Sorry. Judy, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my question. I'm not sure if it came out properly, but does it make sense what I'm saying? That there's some people who have decided that we don't really want to be here anymore? Not because, not a young person who has the whole life in front of them, but somebody who's just has such intense pain that they can't tolerate it anymore, or somebody who's, I think maybe somebody even mentioned it, where all their friends have already died, and maybe their children aren't calling them as often as they used to call them. And so, because I know at least of one person who keeps saying, well, I don't feel like I'm useful anymore. They haven't said that they wanted to do anything, but they don't feel useful anymore. And so is that like a large cohort that you're aware of?
Yes. So yes, there have been increases in older people completing suicide because of the things you've mentioned. If they have a very painful physical illness, they're isolated, family isn't reaching out as much, they've lost a lot of friends, family to death. Those are all risk factors for suicide, and those things can precipitate somebody attempting and completing. I don't know of any specific supports for that cohort of people, but because it is a well-known, that's a very well-known situation, I imagine that there is both group support and individual support. Yeah, and I want to add that we're talking a lot about established support groups, and those are really, really helpful. But informal, just natural supports, faith communities, neighborhood centers, neighbors, those can be really important also, just in increasing the feelings of connectedness and decreasing the feelings of isolation, and also just having somebody kind of knowing how the person is doing and getting more help if needed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Hickey, I just wanted to say one thing.
Yes.
We do have, in September, we will have another session on dealing with mental illness. Our fourth group will be in November, and we will be talking at that session about the various age groups from youth, children, to geriatrics, and every age group in between. So we will be bringing, having people to speak about those different other age groups and support groups that are out there as well. I did put something in the chat. I was in touch with the group. It's called suicidology.com. We did not have them on this particular format. It's not a group that works with, let's say, the Black community or minorities, nothing like that. It's just that we didn't have them on this particular program. But I did put that group in there. They do supposedly work with people who are thinking about suicide, or who they know someone who did commit suicide, that they, I don't know if you've heard of that group.
Have you heard of it, Dr. Collins or Ms. Asiema? Have you all heard of that? Yeah.
I haven't.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, what I haven't heard of will make a new world. There's lots of really great resources, so that sounds wonderful.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I'm thinking that how effective a support group would be. And I'm going to guess that there's one out there, we're just not aware of it. But anyway, this has been a wonderful, wonderful session. Can't thank you ladies enough for sharing your time, your wisdom, your knowledge, your personal experiences. There is no doubt in my mind that you have not uplifted somebody here in this circle this afternoon. We never know who's listening and who needs to hear our voices. I encourage that you leave your information in the chats. I sent out your websites, but if you want to leave more available and more information that's more accessible to you, that's great too. And I'm sure that we'll hear from people in this group. But before we go, I want to give both of you an opportunity. First of all, I want to thank Angela. Thank you so much. You guys are doing such a great job on this series. And if anybody else is on this call and you've got some ideas about something that you want to present to this group, please, it's nothing but an ask. Is that correct, Ms. Angela?
That's it. I was just going to write that in the chat. I agree. It was wonderful having you, Dr. Collins. It was wonderful having you, Ms. Asiema. And wonderful having all the participants, ladies and gentlemen who came in today. So any ideas that you have, anything for our next presentations, like I said, one will be in September, one will be in November. Please, please contact Ms. Higgy. I can put my information in as well, or if you contact Ms. Higgy, she can give you my email or call me. Most definitely would be interested in whatever else we can bring to the group. That's what we're here to do.
But that goes for any subject. So if it's something that's specific to mental health, then you can reach out to Angela or Kilthea or Michelle, because that's the area that they've chosen. And anything else, just reach out, let me know. We had one a few weeks ago on Christianity, and that went over very well. And that was somebody else reaching out wanting to talk about Christianity and social justice. If you didn't see that one, let me know. I'll send you the video. Also, I always forget to tell people that you should be going on to Miss Higgy on YouTube, and you can see most of these conversations. They're listed there. But before we go into all that, I wanted to give our guests a moment to give parting words if they wish, and please, and extend an invitation that you are more than welcome in the circle whenever you want, and please come back again. as a guest, as a participant, just however. But we'll start with you, Dr. Collins, since you went first. Do you have some parting words for us?
Yeah, I want to thank all. I want to thank all of you, but I really want to thank Deirdre for. It's hard to find the words really for sharing your story and being vulnerable and courageous, and also making such a difference for so many people. Yeah, again, I'm having trouble finding words, but thank you so much. It is really moving. I've left my contact information. You can email me, danalcollins@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer. I couldn't get to all the questions because there were so many wonderful ones, but I'm so honored by the level of engagement and the questions and that your trust in asking me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Dr. Dana, for that. I really appreciate it. I really do. And I appreciate everyone on here who has extended love and support on the chat. I really appreciate it. I wish I was able to read through them all, but I really appreciate it. And I thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share my story with you today. Yeah, and if, like I said, if you get nothing else, just know silence can kill. And take care of yourself first before you can actually take care of anyone else.
Okay. All right. So I think, S, are you saying you want us, I'm not understanding, you want me to, we're going to stop the recording. And as you all know, we hang around for a little while after that. It's the recording after recording. But we're going to hang around for just a little while, not as long as we have lately, and talk about what's coming up next. We will not be here next weekend unless there's something really pressing that comes up. We obviously have some things we need to talk about after the call today, which is on another subject. We've had some horrible things happen in our community this past week that we need to spend a moment just touching on. So on that note, I think I'm actually, so I'm going to stop the record. I'm trying to read an instruction in the chat, and I think I got it right. So I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to thank everybody for coming. And I just want us to say again that when Black women gather, what happens?
Amazing things.
Things happen.
Yeah, I'm trying to get, we were live. We could all say it at once. Amazing things happen. But that's our tagline. When Black women gather, amazing things happen. And this has been just another amazing Sunday. And I thank you all so much for coming and being a part of it. And I will see you all in 2 weeks. And thank you again, Angela, and your team. So on that, stop recording.
Thank you.